Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back live talking about great whiskey, talking with some friends from Boutique-y, and this all feels somewhat familiar. Somehow, I can't put my finger on it why, but it does feel somewhat familiar. We've been talking a lot in the past 12 months about the efforts that our friends down in Victoria and Melbourne in particular did going through lockdown to sort of take care for the rest of the country, and now it's Sydney and New South Wales' turn. But that doesn't mean that we can't have fun and drink great whiskey, and tonight more than ever, we have some great whiskey lined up. This is what we're calling probably the most premium of all the boutique tastings we have presented over the past 3 or 4 years, whether they be in-store or online or a mixture of the two. Nothing under 19 years old and some considerably older than that. We've got some people watching in on the various Facebook and YouTube. Feel free to add your comments into the chat. We can bring them up on screen and all do that sort of fun. But it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stream once again, good friend Simon McGoram back up on the Central Coast, isolating in what looks like a pretty good way to isolate. And of course, Dave Worthington, probably the freest of all of us for the first time over live in the UK, back from holidays. So I'd like to kick off with Dave. Firstly, welcome back into the stream. And how were your holidays? Did you get to the Amalfi Coast, or was it Benidorm or California this year? What did you get to?
It has all been, everything in deepest mid-Bedfordshire, running around after kids. So grown-up kids, I might add. So it's not just running around playing whatever you do with young kids. I can't remember, it's such a long time ago, but it's fixing cars and fixing bikes, basically what I've been doing. So yeah, good morning you all down in Australia. It's lovely coming down to Australia on a Tuesday morning.
Excellent. Shout out to Whiskey Is My Jam, regular friend of the stream, tuning in on both the Facebook and the YouTube, which is a wonder how he manages to do that every single time. Let's yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think you want us, as good as we are in conversation, I don't think you want us, our faces, any bigger than you absolutely need, though. So hopefully just on the one screen there. We're going to assume a lot of people here are familiar with Boutique-y whiskey. We've done a lot of tastings with various things with Boutique-y over the years, but we are delving into some premium whiskies. As I mentioned, nothing under 19 years old. In the history of Boutique-y, like, it hasn't been around for as long as some of the Gordon MacPhail's and signatory vintages of the world that have been around for 100 years, and Cadenheads and that sort of stuff. Yet you still have managed to have this collection of quite old whiskies and this sort of thing. So in terms of the vintage and old premium whiskies that Boutique-y has, is this stuff that you're going and buying outright? Is this stuff you're maturing yourselves? Like, how does Boutique-y get their hands on this sort of stuff?
Okay, up until fairly recently, we've done no aging ourselves. So we're basically digging into whiskey stocks with bonders, which is how Scotch whiskey works, certainly for the blending, certainly how it was built up on the back of bonding houses that would, bonded warehouses that would buy new make spirit and age it for the purpose of blending Scotch whiskies, because still 90% of the world's Scotch whiskey is blended Scotch whiskey drunk out of highballs and rocks tumblers, rather than Glencairns and nosing glasses. Certainly from a lot of the closed distilleries bought from private collectors. So most of our Macallan that we've bottled over the years have all come from private collectors because of that Scotch whiskey downturn in the 80s and 90s, where Scotch was virtually worthless. Distilleries were selling new make spirit to private individuals to keep the cash rolling in, and they've cashed their cows in over the last few years and made a killing. And certainly anything with Macallan nowadays, cracky, unlikely that we'll see the likes of that again going forward. But yes, most of our old Scotches and closed distilleries have come from private collectors. Today we can buy direct from distilleries. Those doors have opened up for us because we will celebrate our 9th birthday this September. So we've been around for 9 years on the 12th of September, and in fact, I've got a meeting later this morning about what we're doing for our birthday celebrations this year. I know it's going to be a little bit bigger next year when we go into a 10-year anniversary, so that's looking pretty cool. But most of the stuff that we buy is literally having a great network of bonded warehouse connections in the whiskey industry that pick out these sort of honey casks that would generally be destined to go into the blenders. We'd get cut samples of them and basically say yes or no.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, do you feel like that when you talk about private collectors of casks are less prominent now than they may have been 10, 20 years ago? Plenty of private collectors of bottles. You're not going to take a bottle and stick a boutique label on it. So is that becoming a dwindling resource as well? These private collectors that casks sitting around for 20 years?
Yeah, I think that will definitely. I think there's still people new distilleries open and they need cash. So when Bruichladdich reopened in 2001, there was a surge of Bruichladdich casks. And certainly in 2010, 2011, 2013, so lots of people were coming and selling their 10-year-old laddie casks, and it's still going on. You still see these private Bruichladdich and Octomores, and occasionally an Octomore. We've had a couple. Port Charlottes and even some Loch-and-Dale coming up where the distillery was raising cash at the time. And you're going to see it all again. I think Glenglassaugh, there's lots of little casks around them. Private individuals have bought into the distillery, and so they're coming up from time to time, and hopefully we can get our hands on some Glenglassaugh, because that's one of the distilleries we haven't bottled out of the Scotch whisky malt distilleries that we haven't bottled. There's a handful of them, more than a handful of them, that we'd still like to bottle, but we're slowly getting there. There's a few that we probably will never be able to get hold of the running distilleries, but we're definitely out for that. I mean, Scotch whisky, as whisky geeks and nerds as we all are, we'd love to have a tick in every box of every distillery, and we're getting there. But there's one or two that I don't think we'll be able to get our hands on. Unlikely.
Yeah, excellent. No, it's quite fascinating to see, and sort of what you were talking about there. I certainly think it's a marketing technique. When a new distillery gets acquired or they're about to launch an official single malt line, all of a sudden these little casks across a bunch of independent bottlers start sprinkling out to sort of get the market ready. I find that quite fascinating. But let's look at this pack, because I don't know what time it is. It's about 10 past 10 where you are in the morning, Dave.
Something like that. Yeah, the perfect time for the palate.
Yeah, bloody oath. So we have those who are playing along with us tonight. We have these bespoke packs. Once again, we have 50 mils in all of these bottles. If we were doing this tasting in person, you'd be getting 15 mils. So there's plenty to go back to later on tonight, tomorrow, next week, in all your whiskies. David and Simon, do you maybe talk about like these packs, how they come about, and do they change? How do you choose what goes into these things?
We have 3 packs. We have the Scotch Collection. Why they came about is because none of them we've never had our own miniature collection. Lots of people have asked for some miniatures, and so we've done a few gift packs in 50, standard 50 cl, 50 mil measures. Now, we've had Drinks by the Dram for a long time. As an Atom group, I've had Drinks by the Dram, which are 3 cl measures, which aren't able to go into lots of different markets where you can't sell 3 cl. For example, you can't sell 3 cl in America. So that's one reason. We wanted our own branding rather than just Drinks by the Dram. The Drinks by the Dram drams are fantastic, certainly for a whiskey, someone getting into whiskey, wanting to try lots of different whiskies at an affordable, and certainly some old, and certainly as a whiskey blogger, I used them a lot and bought loads of little Drinks by the Drams over the years and still have collections of them that I still haven't waded my way through. It allows you to get some of those whiskies before buying a full bottle, or as a geek like me, just trying to increase my knowledge and palate collection sort of thing, tasting as many different whiskies as possible. So we put 3 of these boxes. I say the team back at HQ. I'm much more involved with selecting the whiskies nowadays, but at the time I was traveling the world when these were first thought of. And it was basically looking at what stocks we've got to put in them and coming up with some sort of pricing collection. But I think they've done a great job. So we've got 3. We've got the standard Scotch collection, which I think we went through last year, which was the Dufton, the Teeninic, or Thrusk.
Yes.
We did a collection of them with a Linkwood. That's it.
Yes.
So they're all flora and fauna. and there was a tie between the Singletons of the Dufton and the Orthrusk. So there's a lovely collection put together, and it probably came together by accident, but it all tied together beautifully for storytelling. The premium Scotch is everything, like you said, over 19 years old in here. We've got a 26, a 27, a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old to finish there. And then we put a world whiskey collection, which is, we've always been passionate about Scotch whiskey, but we realised quite early on that the whole world, as you know, our Australian series recently was bloody hugely successful over here, and some great whiskies. We've always been passionate about world whiskey. We know that the world's been making some wonderful whiskies, and we bottled our first non-Scotch as an independent bottler just 2 years after our coming together, and we've got on to bottle whiskies from right around the world. So our world whiskey collection, we picked 4 that we had stocks of at the time, and most of them have sold out now in terms of being able to get them again. But there's a wonderful English whiskey in there, probably the best English whiskey I've ever tasted. I put it in blind tastings and blown people away. They're convinced it comes from Islay. There's a fabulous Heaven Hill 9-year-old American whiskey, which is a bourbon but put into a refill casks. So it's just really geeky and interesting stuff. A 3-year-old Bavarian German whiskey, for example, that you put that into a blind tasting and no one has a clue. They love it. It's really powerful dram. It's just 3 years old from Germany, and no one's ever heard of it. Yeah, I love doing the tastings blind ordinarily because you remove those preconceptions of what you're going to take. It was the only way I was going to get an English whiskey into the Glasgow Whiskey Club as well. And, I did, and they loved it, and they hate me for it, though.
The other pack we've done with the little 50ml or 5cl drams is what you've got behind you there, Dave. Yeah, the greatest hits of whiskey, which we've done quite a few tastings. We've actually broken this down and done quite a few tastings with the oak barrel over lockdown last time round.
From the pizza boxes?
Yeah.
And the pizza boxes, yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I reckon we're going to do world whiskey next week. Let's get into some whiskey tonight, and I think we're going to kick off with the Cameronbridge. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, our premium Scotch collection brings together some long-aged whiskies into this neat little gift set. We're going to start our journey on a 27-year-old single grain from Scotland's largest distillery, arguably Europe's largest distillery. It's a 27-year-old single grain from Cameronbridge. So this will be a wheat spirit. The grain distilleries all started switching over from maize to wheat back in the 80s, when wheat became cheaper than maize. There's only one really that's hung around with maize for a little while. We're going to follow that with an interesting blended malt from Speyside. It's known as a teaspooned malt, so we've got labelled as a blended malt. So it's hardly blended at all. It's from a very well-known family-owned Speyside distillery. It's 26-year-old. And then we're going to head over to the Highlands for a 20-year-old Inchmurrin single malt from the really versatile Loch Lomond distillery. And then we'll finish up with a bit of peat, this little trip around Scotland from the island of Malt with a peated Ledaig from the Tobermory distillery. So that's my preferred tasting order.
It's not a little bit of peat.
It is in the context of the 4 drams. It's just 25% peat from the other ones. Yes, it is a nicely peated. It's a lovely dirty Ledaig. Yeah. So this is an exclusive, actually. This Cameronbridge. It's batch 8. It is an exclusive grain for this premium Scotch collection. So we actually had a cask of this 27-year-old, and we batched this just for this pack. There is a sister cask that's almost identical, batch 7 or 9. I can't remember which one it was. We'll come back to that in a minute. Yes, I mentioned it's the largest distillery in Scotland. It's probably one of the most environmentally sustainable in the world too. Cameronbridge distills some of the world's most famous spirits, including grain whiskey for Johnny Walker, Bell's Whiskies, Smirnoff Vodka, Tanqueray, and Gordon's Gin. So it's a huge industrial I mean, it really is an industrial processing, alcohol processing plant. Column stills, obviously taken off lower ABV for grain whiskey and higher for the neutral grain spirits that they're doing. Now, the distillery was founded way back in 1824 and originally known as the Cameronbridge. 2 words. It's also known as the Haig Distillery in the past, named after the founder, John Haig. So great family dynasty in Scotch whisky. It also has the honour of being the first distillery in Scotland to produce grain whisky in a continuous still. And it wasn't the coffee still. This was a much more primitive version invented by Robert Stein, who was a cousin of the founder, John Haig. So it's if you've ever seen some of these Stein stills, there are some old pictures, probably in Bernard's book. I can't remember where I've seen them, but there are some old pictures of Stein's distillery, continuous still, and it was, Anais Coffee went on and improved that and came up with the coffee or column still, which is widely used today. Lovely buttery start, eh?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I've sort of been through this pack before, and the idea was I'm going to open a pack a couple of weeks ago, and then I'm going to leave half of it for tonight. That obviously didn't happen. I finished them all, so I'm opening new bottles again. And last time I did it, I didn't do this first, and when I got to the Cameronbridge, it was very much down that butterscotch, vanilla, all those very classic sort of things. But I'm actually noticing with the net pour, there's a little bit of like lanolin and a dusty sort of note to it. I don't know whether you were saying the industrial thing, because it's actually a little bit more industrial and a little bit more characterful on the nose than some of the other Cameronbridges I've tried.
Yeah, this is grain. Yeah, needs time in the, certainly with wheat. Definitely needs time in the cask. And looking at the colour of this, I would say it was in a fairly active cask. It's not as clear as some of the ones I've seen. A little bit more active than you'd normally get. So there is the character of the wood is starting to come in here. That age is starting to show its hand there, but it is really buttery and sweet and popcorny and grainy as you'd expect. The finish is not quite as sharp as some of the other grains. It does linger a little bit, but it really does fall very quickly, like most grains. It just leaves that little bit of sweetness in the mouth. It's a great, perfect breakfast whiskey, as we say. One to start. When I say breakfast whiskey, I mean I'm not having it for breakfast, but it's a breakfast whiskey to me is one you start a flight of whiskies with. It's not gonna. You wouldn't start the breakfast whiskey with a Ledaig and then follow with the others, because your palate would be stuffed, or you'd be really struggling to bring it back and find any delicacies in this little bit of single grain here. There's a little bit of fruitiness starting to come through here.
Yeah, I get a little bit of like apple compote or something. But definitely, I get that dustiness you're talking about, Scott. I also get like freshly sort of plain wood as well. So definitely in that, on that cask through.
It's apricot. That's what I was just that sort of fresh apricots. Yeah, just starting to come through there. Now this in the UK, the sister cask, which was batch 3, which is very similar in terms of age and ABV. And in profile, pretty much, I'm sort of 8 here. Retailed over here for £65 for a 27-year-old single grain is banging, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go on, Dave.
So do you want to have a quick look at the label? Tell the label story.
Yep,
we've got a guy playing tiddlywinks on the label there. So let's have a look at the label.
And there are some pretty obscure, tenuous references on some of the boutique-y labels, and arguably this one could be right up there.
Yeah, there's a few little silly things on here. Cameronbridge is home of. Cameronbridge is one of the first distilleries, I think, that certainly had a grain whiskey on the market for a long time. As a whiskey nerd, and if you Ian Buxton's 101 whiskies to try before you die, there's Cameronbridge, a grain whiskey, a young, unaged grain whiskey that you could pick up in the old days for less than 20 quid. They remarketed this Cameronbridge and put it in a blue perfume bottle and had David Beckham promote it, big sports personality, with the Haig Club, which is basically a single grain Cameronbridge, but a little bit younger. So we wanted a personality, a sports personality on our label, really as a, it was our little in-house joke, basically, having a dig at Diageo, but not really having a dig. It was just, we wanted a sports personality. So that is Dr. Patrick Barry. He is the current and 8-time world singles champion and current and 10 times English national champion for Tiddlywink. So we approached Dr. Patrick Barry when we first launched this with our 24-year-old, which you can see there on the label, batch 1. And he was really up for it. He thought it was a fabulous idea. And we sponsored him and we got him a couple of bottles. He wasn't the reigning champion at that time, but shortly after that first release, he was heading to the next tournament and he regained his titles. He is a very clever guy at Cambridge University. Tiddlywinks. Lots of people don't even know what Tiddlywinks is. A children's game in Victorian era. It was sort of brought back to life by Cambridge University. The rumour has it, according to the Oxford University, is that it was they created a game that they could win because Oxford University was always winning the boat race, apparently. So that's where the Tiddlywinks reference came in. But yeah, they created the game, and it's the home of Tiddlywinks nowadays. If you don't know what Tiddlywinks is, it's flipping these little counters into a pot, and it's very skillful, apparently. I haven't played since I was a child, but there is our Dr. Patrick Barry. He's had T-shirts made with this label on and everything. The labels have a few other things in there. So the TW up here on the top is sort of a little reference to Haig Club. It's almost in the same font as the HC of Haig Club, because it is, Cameronbridge is the Haig Club distillery. This was the first one. Our labels change every time, as I said, between each batches. So there's the tasting note. So you can just see he wanted his colleague on the label. So this little lady on his left-hand shoulder changes to a colleague in the universities. He'd asked if a colleague could become on the label. And then the differences between batches. I think I've got batch 3 shown here because I couldn't find a batch 8 label. But the labels change between each batches. Just one little thing, so you can see the counters changed. On batch 2, his colleague appeared. On batch 3, the counters changed the colour there, and then goes on. So this is the sister cask label here, which is very, very similar to this batch 8.
Having a bit of time to sit with this, Dave, I completely understand what you were talking about with, that finish has that single grain-esque finish where it's a little bit on the shorter side compared to a malt. But every time I go finish and go back to the nose, there's more on the nose, and you just want to keep nosing it and nosing it. 27 years in a barrel, probably year and a bit in a bottle. Open today, it's going to take a bit of time for it to open up.
Yeah, this is. I just put the cask details. It is a vatting of refill casks. So there's more than one cask. It wasn't a single cask, it was a double cask. It is. Yeah, the trouble with these sort of delicious grain whiskies like this is that finish is so short, and like you say, you want to go back and nose it, and then you take another sip, and before you know it, the bottle's gone. It's so drinkable.
And funnily enough, when the bottle's gone, it's about time you want to start playing Tiddlywinks. I think that's the optimum mindset for it.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. Get the counters out.
Couple of comments coming through. I want a quick shout out to whiskey. We've seen a little bit of Cameronbridge here. We actually imported a bit the oak barrel, really just to see what it was like because it wasn't being brought in. Those bottles going for between $70 and $90. You can get Haig Club for just over $120 plus. So, who said marketing was dead?
There you go. I think I've got a bowl of Cameronbridge down in my cupboard downstairs, so definitely still got that. Used to use it for training purposes more than anything when I was at Diageo. So this is what grain whiskey is. They give people a little sample. But
it's a great.
Yeah, and it's delicious. It's great to mix with, but certainly drinking something at this age would be the way I'd want to go rather than go for that non-age statement stuff.
Yeah, let's keep it with the rich people here with the 27-year-old whiskies, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did one buy a bottle of Hague Club as well, and was confused my family completely when I gave them the taste of that. Going, what the hell is this? But it is a fantastic looking bottle.
I think my experience with my friends about Hague Club, it is a fantastic looking bottle, and actually the juice is not that bad. It's I like Cameronbridge. Was when we were pre my time at the Oak Barrel and pre a lot of the great independent bottle stores opening up. You used to buy a little bit 10 years ago from online stores and that sort of thing. And normally UK stores would have shipping tiers back then. So you'd have price for 4, price for 8 bottles. And so as you're walking out, maybe you start your order at 10 o'clock. It's about 1 a.m. before you actually place your order. And then it arrives 2 weeks later, and all of a sudden you've used Hague Club to pad out your order to hit that shipping level you needed to. So I don't remember ordering this, but I caught my eye in did you also want in the check? Yeah, bloody oath, go and do that. So I want a few of us. Whiskey number 2, we going on to the blended malt, I think.
Yes, that would be good. Yeah, blended malt number 1 is a 26-year-old. Now, this is what we in the trade known as a teaspooned Speyside whiskey. It was a release of just 322 bottles from this batch. That's big bottles, and then we've obviously drammed some of those bottles. We've released this one at 48.3% ABV. We've had to label it as a blended malt. We can't label it as a teaspooned malt. It's known in the trade as a teaspooned malt, but it is by law, by definition, as Scotch whiskey, a blended malt. So there are only 5 classifications allowed in Scotch whiskey: single malt, single grain, which is 100% malted barley in pot stills and a single distillery; single grain, any mixture of grains in a distillery. So you can put anything other than malted barley or mixture of things in pot stills, and it's still called a single grain, but generally single grain is wheat in column stills. A blended malt is a blend of malt whiskies, single malt whiskies from more than one distillery, so 2 distilleries put together, and blended grain, and obviously blended Scotch, which is sort of the leading category as most people in the world drink blended Scotch. Teaspooning was introduced in the 1980s by William Grant and Sons. And by teaspooning their malts, they protect their brand from independent bottlers like us from releasing casks brought on the open market as single malts. Now, they did this because at the time when whiskey became fairly worthless, with the whiskey lock in the 80s, at the end of the 70s, the early 80s, lots of distilleries started closing down. There was lots of whiskey on the open market, and there was some pretty unscrupulous independent bottlers bringing some bad light onto a number of, they were just bottling nonsense, and the family saw that as an attack, or it was a risk of destroying their own brand that they'd worked so hard. So they stopped selling single malts, William Grant and Sons, so from their Glenfiddich and the Balvenie and their Cameronbridge distillery, they stopped selling single malt to anyone else. But I'm pretty certain it was the first, as they introduced either Glenfiddich or Balvenie. They were the people who introduced teaspooning. Now, most single malts are in high demand by blenders, especially the Speyside whiskies, and still much of a distillery's production is destined for the blended Scotch whisky market. By teaspooning their base malt with a small amount of another malt, the distillery profile remains. So the key distilleries that teaspoon today are all the William Grant and Sons distilleries and Glenmorangie. And in the trade, these teaspooned malts all have names. So this, on the cask end, as we would have bought it, would have Burnside. on it. So it would be known as a Burnside. So if you're in a warehouse and you see these casks lying around of these blended malts from William Grant & Sons, Burnside indicates that it's a Balvenie with a mug full of Glenfiddich, and who doesn't want a mug full of Glenfiddich every now and again? No, this is coffee, honest. A Wardhead is Glenfiddich and Balvenie. A Westport always used to be Glenmorangie and Glenmurray, because they were owned by the same company. I'm not sure what Glenmorangie do now for Westporting, because they don't own Glenmurray anymore. Alderney is Kininvie and Glenfiddich, allegedly, and Dalrymple, Ailsa Bay, and Balvenie. I say allegedly. It's not what I don't actually know. This sort of rumor has it, is it? So it's hardly a blended malt at all. And we have bottled a few more of them. We bottled blended malt number 3, which is a Wardhead, and blended number 4, which will be a Dalrymple. I don't think they're actually blended at all these days. It's just a barcoding operation. The very thought of opening casks up between distilleries and splooshin a bit in and putting them aside, I think they're just destined like this. We're making so many for the blending market, label them all up as Burnside, barcode them as Burnside. They all go into a refill bourbon cask rather than the high-end cask. This is blending stock known as fillings in the trade. I'm pretty certain they don't do that. But if he did a chemical analysis on this, I think it would all come from one distillery. It's just that's how it comes out of the cask as a blended malt, and that's how we've got to bottle it. We don't name it a Burnside, we just call it blended malt number 1. And it's deliciously fruity.
I was going to say, what a nose. I mean,
Yeah.
It started with that big, for me, that big violets and perfume thing, then into raspberries and plums, strawberries and cream, just like really luscious, almost. And it's one of my favorite tasting notes is when you open the pack of Allen's Lollies, and it's the first time and you get like the flavorings from each color sort of coming through. It's like intense raspberry, intense plum. It's like there's nothing really subtle about this nose.
No.
That's really there's a candy that, I mean, it's just reminded me of a candy. You mentioned some candies, as sweets as we call them in the UK, but I was educated at an American college as well, so I'm quite happy to call them candies. But like a strawberries and cream sort of candy that we used to have out in the Far East.
Very Wimbledon. I was getting a little touch of a little touch of licorice also as well. That just a tiny hint of anise under all that fruit.
Yeah, there's a little bit of fresh plums as well coming through there. It's delicious. Absolutely. I mean, the blended malts and such great value for a price. For the age statement that you get on these blended malts, because it's a blended malt and it is fillings, so it goes into most of these are dressing malts basically, and certainly Balvenie was known as a dressing malt for the blenders. It's the high end. There's a blender's handbook of 1974 that sort of grades all the distilleries into first class, second class. It's all the Speyside sitting up there, and Balvenie and Glenfiddich are right up there. It's just delicious. Let's have a look at the label. So we wanted to play on this teaspoon, and so most of our all of our teaspoon malts have spoons in the label. This one was more prominent, and it's a bit of a sort of a. Is that coming through? No, that's going flick, 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 isn't it?
Yeah. Just calm that down for a second, see if that will. There we go. It's better.
Sharing that, and let's try again.
Dave, just on that, what were we talking about at the start of the stream tonight in terms of where casks like of this age are being sourced? Because this is a filler's malt, it was destined for the blenders. Arguably this is coming from a blending house or from a broker rather than a private collection. Does that mean that these sorts of things, this is what we can potentially see casks of in the future rather than being one-offs from Boutique-y?
We bottled a number of batches of blended malt number 1 and blended. They're definitely around on the market. I mean, if you want to make a 25-year-old blended Scotch whiskey, for example, you need aged malts to put into that, because the age statement on a bottle of whiskey is always the youngest whiskey in the blend. So yeah, a 25-year-old or even a 21-year-old blended Scotch whiskey may have 26-year-old single malts in them or older grains in them. You know, the age statements of the past, you know, there was always older whiskies in blends in the past, much older whiskies. Distilleries being run by accountants, you're definitely seeing those age statements drop down. So a 10-year-old single malt from a distillery is 10-year-old rather than 11, 12, 15-year-old, or a bucket of 18-year-old in it, like it may have had in the past. I think, well, you know, distilling techniques have improved over the years, and certainly the focus on wood within distilleries is much more prominent now. So yeah, 10-year-old whiskies are 10-year-old whiskies, and they're great at 10-year-old. But are we going to be releasing? Yeah, if we find, we've had some 27-year-old recently. I think in our recent batch with the Australian, we had the Australian release alongside the Australian release. We had some Scotches. I'm pretty certain we had a blended malt Scotch whiskey in the pack there that was 26, 27-year-old as well. So it's another one that we'd found that was just superb. Yeah, if we find them and we think they're worthy of a boutique bottling, then definitely we'll take them.
Yeah, interesting.
They just represent great value.
Yeah, there's definitely.
So this in the UK.
Yeah, I was going to say there's definitely some more teaspoon malt coming up. One which you mentioned, which we can't say yet because we haven't announced the releases. But yeah, there's definitely some more teaspoon stuff coming up, which I'm quite excited about. One in particular on the way it looks delicious on spec. Can't wait to try it.
The next release coming up very, very shortly, and next month.
The one we can't talk
we've got a global. Well, no one's watching, are they? I'm really excited about that. It's one that it's a brand new label, so it's a teaspoon malt that we talked about earlier. So we have bottled Burnside, which is blended malt Scotch whiskey #1. We have bottled Wardhead, which is Glenfiddich with a cup of Balvenie in it, and that's our blended malt #3. Blended malt #2 was something we'd put together with some malts ourselves. And we bottled Dalrymple, which is Ailsa Bay. That was our blended malt #4. So we haven't bottled any Alduni, which is Kinninvie, and trying to get hold of Alduni. I haven't seen any Alduni, but I have seen Westport on the open market, and that could be in our next release, which I'm very excited about. So it could be. I don't know. Let me have a quick look. Is it Westport? Yeah, probably could be.
I appreciate like this. The whiskey is excellent, and I'm also appreciating the label for the in-joke, but also the very un-COVID, un-lockdown elements of the label. It's sort of looking back onto festivals past.
Sort of a Glastonbury feel to this, isn't it? It's out in the field, and we've got sort of the spoon as the Glastonbury tour as a monument on top of a hill there. It's a very Glastonbury feel, and we've continued that sort of rock concert feel on our blended malt #3, where we have a full sort of heavy metal and the spoons are rocking out, which I really love that label too. Our tasting notes for this one, as soon as you open this one, this is the official notes, which I think are probably on the back of the pack as well anyway, but so that strawberries and cream isn't on there, but I'll definitely get that, and that sort of fresh plums note coming through. It's just delicious. And I say it's such great value for 26 years old. This retailed in the UK at £88 a bottle. That's a recommended retail price over here.
Yeah,
and before I get emailed, no, there's none left. In packs is the only way you can get any more.
Yeah, I mean, all of these would be sold out in full-size bottles at this stage, because these Durans would be from a little while ago.
Just a comment here. I wouldn't put it past the boutique-y crew that there's a bit of Life of Brian sort of influence on some of their labels. I can see where you're coming from there. Yeah,
I guess so. There's a bit of a yeah. Monty Python was definitely a feature Monty Python links would definitely feature in our thought process for labeling. That's for sure. I don't think I was around for certainly the label story on this one when we first released batch one. Certainly wasn't in the office discussing labels, but yeah, the label design process that we go through now is a lot of fun. There's a brief that we all sort of feed into now for the new releases, which is a lot of fun.
As I'm sort of saying, like, an hour is not a long enough time to really sit on one of these whiskies, let alone all of them. Which, I've said it before, is one of the great silver linings of these virtual tastings is in these 50ml bottles, there's plenty to go back to, and go to again, whether that's tonight or down the track. Yeah, I mean, just on that note, we are offering, because we don't have exit through the gift shop at the moment after this tasting where we can do special pricing for you. We are doing free shipping on everything boutique-y tonight. That's the only plug I'll give that. The whiskey sells itself. I don't need to do the hard sell. But we do have some of these sets left as well under the events that I've just put back up there.
Oh, it's a cracking little set to go through. A little flight to share with a buddy. Yeah.
I mean, I've tried some. I've tried a couple of these boutique-y Burnsides, and they're just absolutely delicious. They're excellent liquids. That is a cracking dram, and I would shudder to think what you'd pay for a 26-year-old official bottling of Balvenie these days as well. At
near 48.3% as well.
Yeah.
Certainly paying $110 to sit alongside 3 other samples is not going to happen.
No.
Let's go back to the Cameronbridge.
You don't really want to move on, do you? Like,
I don't really. No,
we just call it now. That's it. See you later. I'm going to sit on this the next hour.
I'm doing a little top of this already. I mean, yeah, I think it was that fruitiness was just incredible. I mean, I don't think we saw that so much come through in the official notes, but
no. In the official notes, it wasn't there, was it? But I don't know if I wrote these or someone else wrote these at the time. But what was the Glenfiddich and Balvenie called? A Wardhead. Is the teaspooned Glenfiddich. Yeah, you can, if you go into some brokers' warehouses, you will find casks labeled. I think I've got some pictures somewhere on my phone when I was in a warehouse in Speyside a little while ago. You see these casks of Wardhead, clearly labeled Wardhead. Yeah, that's what known in the trade for the blenders. So if they're looking for that sort of Fiddick style, they'll place their order for the Wardheads and the Burnsides and the whatever.
Also, Dave, just lingering quickly on names for teaspoon whiskies. You mentioned before Westport. So when did Glenmorangie sell Glenmurray? So when would they get some stocks? Would they have sold all the stocks? What would they? We're not sure what they're these days.
I don't know. I mean, they owned Glenmurray for a long time. A long time. From the 30s, didn't they? Glenmorangie owned Glenmurray from the sort of 1930s. So they sold the Glenmurray sold out to Moët Hennessy in 2004, and I don't think they had Glenmurray then. So I think maybe 2001. In the back of my head, I'm thinking, is it 2001 that they sold Glenmurray and the French company?
So it's just Ardbeg and Glenmorangie they've got now, and I'm pretty sure they wouldn't teaspoon Glenmorangie with Ardbeg.
No, that'd be silly, wouldn't it? it would be nothing. Yeah, but this is just hearsay about what they actually. I seriously don't believe that they would. Just as coming from a manufacturing industry, the very thought of logistics of moving, okay, William Grant and Sons had it easy because 3 of their single malt distilleries are on one site, so it's very, very simple to roll a barrel between between sites and roll that barrel of Glenfiddich down to the Balvenie filling station, and every time you fill a cask, just put a thimble full or put a drop in it or whatever.
Yeah.
It's very simple to do that in one site, but the logistics of Glenmurray and Glenmorangie, I know they're shipping casks around and they're at various warehouses, and I remember going to Glenmurray distillery in 2012. I think I was up there the first time to visit, and they had just been given a Glenmurray 30-year-old back. So Glenmorangie were clearing out their warehouses and found pallet loads of this 30-year-old Glenmurray that was distilled in 74. Yeah, 2014. Distilled in 1974 and then bottled 30 years later. So lost for 10 years. So they did have stocks of this bottled 30-year-old. Right. Should we get on to the next one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just while you're pouring that as well, just to put in perspective of modern times with some of these things, and why they're quite we're sort of harping on them. We do it's to a different indie bottler, but we do have a 21-year-old Westport single cask on the oak barrel shelves at the moment. That's $260 for members, which is about the price of Glenmorangie's Signet. So a non-age statement, and 21-year-olds are going for about $1,000 for some of the odd ones. They're in silly bottles, but that's sort of like the value you can find in these things.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I'm not going to lie, I did sort of skip ahead and nose this, and loving the nose on this as well. Big contrast to that blended malt we just had, but this is, for me, like honey on buttered crumpets and just so Morris. This is another good breakfast dram for you, Dave.
I think it's a little bit rich. It's a little bit richer on the nose. It's a little bit richer on the nose to the Balvenie, the Burnside. The Burnside is light and fruity, and I'd consider that another breakfast dram. This is a little bit oilier on the nose, I'd say. It's a 20-year-old Inchmurrin. It's a third batch under this label. It was a release of 669 bottles at 51% ABV. So this is 51. Yes, it is 51. So Inchmurrin is one of those several. Crikey, how many single malts do they do up there? Quite a lot. At the Versa, I think something like 12 different spirits. I remember going to a distillery tour up there with the Drambury crew, and we tasted all the different new make spirits in the lab, which was just amazing. So Inchmurrin, several single malts produced at the very versatile Loch Lomond distillery in Alexandria, right at the bottom of Loch Lomond. They use a unique pot still that they have. It's a pot still with a sort of straight neck and some plates in there. 3 plates, I think they have in this one. But to me, it's a Lomond still, but you can't make single malt whiskey in a Lomond still, so it's not called a Lomond still under the SWA rules. I don't know how they get away with it, but they do. But who cares? It's a Loch Lomond still to me. The Loch Lomond distillery is fairly unique. It is unique in Scotland, as it's both a malt and grain distillery, originally set up by its former owner to be Scotland's self-sufficient distillery. So rather than playing that normal game of exchanging the spirit you make for fillings of grain and malt for your own blends, it was designed to make all of its own requirements. Now, Inchmurrin has
Sorry, Dave, go on.
Intensely fruity new make spirit, and it evolves into those sort of lighter flavors of grass and flowers, but this is really quite oily on the nose when I first revisited. It's been a while since I've revisited this, but I have a high cut point from a pot still equipped with rectifying heads effectively.
When I went through this pack previously, this is the whiskey I actually started with. I started with this, then went into the Cameronbridge, and it's just showing me like how different it is this time around. Like it's still the same whiskey, but those piney notes, that toasty thing, Simon, that you were talking about as well, are a lot more defined for me this time around than that sort of fruity notes that I got, a couple of weeks ago when I first tried it. But it's like everything with Loch Lomond that I find, it's really distinctive. There's no sitting on the fence with anything they do there. There's, we're going to go do this distillation run or challenge, this flavor profile, and we're going to do it 110%. We're not going to do it 50% and try and be everything to everyone.
it's just delicious, isn't it? It is. I think it's bigger. I think I've got them in the right order. I think it's bigger and bolder than the previous two.
Yep. Out of interest,
Now
they blend their different makes together. This is what I want to know. Do they make?
They do.
Yeah.
They have a number of different blended Scotch brands, not well known over here, but I can't. Glen Douglas or something like that. I think there is one. I have to. Where would I look for that? Where was it all?
But they don't try. They don't try and sell. They don't try and market that as single malt. So it's from the same distillery. Could they blend their different makes together and call it single malt still?
Oh, yes, I guess they could, couldn't they? Yeah, because it's a single pot still, different styles, different cut points. They could still call. They could. Yeah, I guess they're infinite, isn't it? The almost infinite number of styles that they could create. Now they do have Inchmurrin. I remember the old disco cows, disco cow labels of Glen Scotia, and then they had the Inchmurrin label alongside it, which was that sort of similar sort of vein of a tin with a sort of arty coloured. I've got one. I had a 21-year-old my lad bought me for my birthday a long time ago. Yeah, the Inchmurrin is still around, or Loch Lomond is definitely their bigger brand now as they've rebranded with their new owners, and they've done some great stuff. In fact, the whiskey coming out of the distillery nowadays is absolutely superb. I think they went through a ropey phase, and there was a bit of a hit and miss. Certainly that 21-year-old Inchmurrin that I had, that my lad bought me, wasn't particularly, I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't superb. It wasn't stunning. I tried to like it all the way through to the end, but it wasn't something that you wanted to go back to. It's very different to this.
I'm getting more cereal notes the longer I spend with it as well.
Yeah. I was just thinking it's really cereally on the nose now coming through. Yeah, it comes from the name Inchmurrin is Loch Lomond's largest island. There are two other Loch Lomond malts also named after islands, Inchmurrin and Inchfad. I think we haven't bottled any Inchmurrin, but we have bottled some Inchfad, which is they're both peated malts. Now our Loch Lomond label, I think if it's bottled as a Loch Lomond, it's a single grain in the boutique range, because Inchmurrin was at the time their single malt range, and when we bottled the Loch Lomond with a Loch Lomond label, it's the grain whiskey that's either, well, they do 100% malted barley through their coffee still and call it a single grain, but 100% malted barley. They've done that, but our one would be just from their commercial grain distillery, their fillings. So our label really sort of takes the mick out of this distillery. You can see their pot stills. You can see this pot still with the straight neck and the 3 plates in, which is their unique still. So they have a collection of stills there. They have an old coffee still, and they have the big continuous stills in the back in a separate distillery out the back where they do all their grain whiskies. There's a fascinating distillery if you can get a trip. It's not got a visitor centre, but they do tours for whiskey clubs and groups. So this was our Loch Lomond label, and we've used this throughout all of the Loch Lomond spirits that we've bottled. So we've bottled some Inchfad, Croft and Gear, I think we bottled as well, which is another one of their labels. So wizardry, it's all about wizardry taking place behind their closed stores, and the story of their different stills is just a cover. So they all sort of change different colours, but the same sort of wizardry background to it. And the official notes there.
Okay. Yeah.
I found it quite oily, but I can see there's sort of stewed apples and figs coming through there. Absolutely.
It's amazing the power of suggestion, isn't it?
Yeah.
As soon as you read that and put your nose into it, oh yeah.
Oh, I know.
I do like this. I do like this.
I was saying before we just went live that when I did this was actually my pick of the batch. the first time through. I'm gonna have another think about it after we finish tonight. But I can certainly there's an for lack of a better word, there's an ugliness to this. Like there's a grittiness or something that we have all these flavor profiles and they're not necessarily meant to be together, but somehow they work. And I like that sort of ugly duckling thing about this whiskey.
It's definitely
I think it's that oily.
you're gonna like. It's that oiliness that would definitely be this is definitely down your vein, Scotty. But the blend number one's just too pretty for you, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, very pretty, and it's going to be a tough one this time around because it was very pretty tonight. Whatever the weather, the temperature might be a little bit different last time around. It really hit my my taste buds.
It's the way you taste them as well, and they build up on the profiles. So put them in a different order, and you might find one that doesn't actually work in that order. So it's getting a bit of cask char coming through now on this one. You just having been playing with some casks over my last busman's holiday 2 weeks. I've got a couple of casks on the patio that I've been sorting out, and a couple of cask ends, and those in that sort of residue of the whiskey in the char, and that's what you're sort of picking up now.
You're telling me when you're on holiday, when you take a week off, you play with casks. That's what you do.
I was doing a bit of coopering. I was bashing some. I made myself a Cooper's.
Fair enough.
Actually, just tightening some casks up. Absolutely. Okay.
I think it's time we crushed all our flavor profiles with what we have already tried.
Yeah.
Before. Let's release the peat, shall we?
Yeah. I'm excited. Yeah, talking about this is surely going to deliver.
On specs on this, I found that for Ledaig or Ledaig or however you want to say it this day of the week, I found the sweet spot for some of these indie bottlings has been around that 9, 10, 11-year-old sort of range. A lot get released at that point, and a lot seem to work really well. So this is considerably older than that. This is double the age. So it's quite a fascinating experiment in taking this, and it's lost none of its grit, none of its fight, and none of its bravado in that extra 9 years.
Yeah, it's a 19-year-old Ledaig from Isle of Mull's Tobermory distillery. It's our fourth batch, a release of just 1,121 bottles at 46% ABV. Tobermory distillery, founded originally way back in 1798 and was originally known as the Ledaig distillery. Pronounced, Safe Haven in Gaelic, Scots Gaelic. So it is in the end of Tobermory Harbour in this beautiful bay. The distillery's had a really troubled history with closures and reopenings throughout its existence. And for a short while during the early 80s, its buildings were transformed into holiday lets and even a cheese storage facility. Yeah, indeed, cheese, very cheesy. But it wasn't until 1993 when the distillery buildings and its remaining stock were bought and a future was assured as Tobermory Distillery and production resumed. Now, single malt is released under both names, with Ledaig being reserved for their peated versions with a phenol content of around 30 to 40 ppm, and Tobermory being their unpeated. Now, we have actually bought a 23-year-old Ledaig, labelled on the barrel as Ledaig, bought it on spec, and when we got the tasting samples, it was unpeated. We asked for a Ledaig, this one's unpeated, and they sent us a picture of the barrel with a cask end, and underneath it had been stenciled after it had been originally painted up as a Ledaig, unpeated. So yeah, it's a 23-year-old that we've got. This an unpeated. We had to bottle it as a Ledaig because that's what all the paperwork says. But we reckon they just must have splashed some Tobermory into it when things weren't great. Distilleries changing hands, but this is very Ledaig-like. Yeah.
I was going to say you were going to have some Marmite soldiers for breakfast. You got buttered Marmite soldiers coming on the nose there. this Ledaig for me. This is your breakfast right here.
Yeah, this is looking like a perfect accompanying dram with my Marmite soldiers later on. Yeah, so this is
It does sort of sum up from an Australian's point of view, that sort of cold winter, it's always raining, coal mining town in England sort of breakfast. That's the sort of breakfast this is reminding me of.
Yeah.
So this is from a batting of refill sherry butts.
Okay.
So you got that sherry fruit is starting to come through now on the nose, but it's all dirty. A little bit oiliness coming through as well.
Talking about unpeated Ledaig that we had, with some of that we ended up shipping to Japan, and it was one of my first trips over there with Adam Brands and Boutique-y, trying to explain to them what this Ledaig was and why it was unpeated. It was quite confusing, but
funny enough, like
delicious dram.
Yeah, I questioned it immediately and said, "Have we bottled this wrong?" And then Sam or Toby said, "No, I think we've got the pictures of the cask here," and they sent me the cask and photos. So I carried around on my phone to explain it. You know, that it had been stenciled up, unpeated long after it had been filled. So I think it was a surprise when probably the owners found it. Yeah. Our label. So this is batch number 1. The label. I always start the label story with batch number 1, and then flick over, and you'll see that the label changes with every little details with every batch. So this will always be the Ledaig label. We've got the spirit of Ledaig, a sentiment, planet smasher, and he's off to take on his well-known. You can see Tobermory from the tip of Isla. You can see on a clear day, which is it's quite often there's some beautiful clear. If you follow any of the people on social media on Isla, there are some great pictures from Bunnahabhain Distillery across the sound there, and you can see Mull in the background there. So yeah, we've sort of got this sort of planet smasher coming out from the Isle of Mull and trying to hit Isla, basically, that they can make peated whiskey as well. Put up with the Isla giants. So we've got Captain Hammer there. He grew a helmet on batch 2, and lots of little things change as we go through. So here's the tasting notes here. You can see the helmet changing. You can see the stars and the constellations starting to come through, shooting stars in the background. Little things like that change every time, every batch. I'm just trying to have a look through other things. I can see if there's anything on the islands. I can't see anything. So on there, down the bottom there, you can see Bamore Distillery, I guess, down there at the bottom of Lochindale. I guess that must be Buccleuch over here. I don't know what that little town is over there, but there's obviously some... Under the label there was obviously the Bunnahabhain and the Kalila distilleries over here. But yeah, that's our label there. And it's very oily on the nose.
It's funny on the palate, and that entry to the palate. It's got like a really it's. I'm gonna use that word again. Dirty on the nose, gritty and grimy. And on the palate, there's this like moment of clarity with this syrupy sweetness that just hits. Then you get into the finish and it's grimy again. But there's like it's this quite beautiful little as I say, moment of clarity with that syrupy sort of hits the tongue, that jolt of sweetness.
It's a cracking Ledaig there. Absolutely, really impressed with this one. Batch 3 before was an 18-year-old, which was another beauty. This is lovely. That's a lovely way to finish the breakfast.
Simon, I might throw this one to you before I get asked, which I inevitably will. Everything that we've tried tonight sold out, isn't it, in terms of full-size bottles, well and truly?
Yeah, everything here you won't be able to get in full size. I don't think so, and certainly, well, there might be some. I don't know. I mean, I've thought stuff sold out before, and then I've spoken to Dave, and Dave and Sam have a secret stash which they don't necessarily allow the export team to get hold of, which they're using for a project. So
I'm checking. I'm checking for you now.
I would be surprised if any of this is still around, though. Maybe, yeah, we'll see.
We find out what they're doing with that then. Okay, I found some 27-year-old grain whiskey from Cameronbridge, but it's not the same one that we've tasted tonight, but it is a batch 4, quite similar, but I don't know what's happening with that. I know, I'm pretty certain the blended malt will have definitely
gone. Yeah, and the Ledaigs have been going pretty quickly too. They've been pretty popular.
Yeah,
I keep an eye on that list pretty regularly, but
taking a couple of taking a couple of sips of these, and I'm going back to just like the near empty glass now, and it is the most cop-out Scott tasting note for a peated whiskey. But this is like, I'm getting more and more steam train on this, and there are lots of different elements and life cycles to steam train, even within the day of a steam train being fired up and then sent to bed. And this is right at the night, like this is towards the end. Everything's covered in soot. The whole driver's cab is covered in soot, and the fire's still going, and but you're not feeding anymore. So it's like the fire's like looking for oxygen and looking for things to hold on to. So you get that like flinty sort of smoke jumping off the steel and iron around, but everything absolutely is covered in soot. And so, while we've certainly in the oak barrel whiskey tastings, we've had steam train working up a mountain, steam train getting fired up first thing in the morning. This is the last cause before you shut it off for the night.
It's like I'm just looking through the stock list now. It says there are 7 bottles of the Inchmurrin still sitting.
Simon, you know what to do. Put them on a ship.
Okay, all right. I'll get them.
I'll send you the detail. Yeah, I think there's none. There's only, I'm not convinced on that. 7 bottles in export doesn't sound right. That would have been moved, I'm sure, but it is showing it there. And the Ledaig that's only available. There's a few bottles left in the UK. That's all. A handful of bottles. I'm just trying to find that now. Yeah, 4 bottles.
Yeah,
4 bottles sitting at Mom.
Judy Payne, master of Malt. Okay. Now, let's. I'll see if I can find that Inchmurrin. I'll take a look for it.
I'll grab the number for you.
Inchmurrin, it was a cracker.
It is. Yeah, normally it disappears pretty quickly. There's none available in the UK, but I just see there's 7 bottles sitting in Bond.
It is the sort of, we don't see a huge amount of Loch Lomond in general, in Australia, regardless of what the spirit makeup is or whatever they're calling it this week. We don't see a huge amount of it, which is interesting. We haven't seen a huge amount of Glen Scotia, which perhaps since the relabel and the redone, we've seen a bit more of that, which is. But yeah, hopefully we can see more Loch Lomond in the future.
Yeah, I mean they've got a importer based in Melbourne, and you start to see them around a few whiskey shows. Are certainly active, and they seem. I've been doing a bit of research around the Asia Pacific. They're certainly out there. Just what's coming down this part of the world is there doesn't seem to be huge selection at present.
Look, I want to say a big thank you to Dave for tuning in tonight. We asked you for an hour, and you've given more than that as you normally do. Welcome back from holidays, straight back into it. Thank you so much for joining us, and for everyone for coming along and being part of this journey. Obviously, this is going to be up on the Facebook and on the YouTube for people to watch back. Any final comments, final thoughts on these whiskies? I know I've got one that maybe the blended number 1 is my pick this week as my pick of the night. It's very unneat, but
it's turned pretty.
Yeah, I don't. There's a long way before I turn pretty, but my whiskey habits maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me that that blended malt was just absolutely stunning. I know, like you, Scott, I tend to go more on the sort of dirty, more interesting side of that. That was just outstanding tonight.
I've just checked the stock of that blended malt number one, and there's one bottle left on Master of Malt, and I'm just putting it in my basket. Oops. Oops. Yeah. Sorry about that.
But like, I really encourage anyone who's got one of these packs, go back and give them a bit of time. And each one of these whiskies has stories to tell beyond what we've been able to do in 15 minutes each tonight. Even like, it's almost one of those things when we had to move on, it was like, oh, but I'm just starting to understand it, and now we're moving on. So I know as soon as we get off time, I'm going to go back, probably drink a bit of water to get this as much of the Ledaig out of my mouth as possible before we go back. But like, the more I sit on this Ledaig, maybe I just sit on this tonight, and the other ones I can do tomorrow.
Just popping back to that blend, now starting to get more sort of lychee and tropical fruits coming through as well. Like, every time getting something different. Very good.
I've just gone back to the Loch Lomond, the Inchmurrin even. That's very good. Yeah, absolutely superb. Thank you very much for having me. I absolutely love coming to Australia in the morning. It's a highlight of the week, that's for sure. Are you at Round Table tomorrow, Scotty?
Yes, we'll have Roundtable tomorrow. We're launching. We're not launching, but we're going to talk about some new Australian whiskies, the new Morris whiskies.
I got a little, so I'm going to join. I'll come and have a dram with you guys.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun. Try something a little bit different, but certainly a bit of a. It's going to make waves in Australia. Let's put it that way. Going to shake things up a little bit, but we will be back next Tuesday again for. And I have nothing to base this on, but I'm going to take a guess. We're going to be in lockdown still at this point next Tuesday to do the World Whiskey Pack, which, Dave, you were talking about before. I've only tried one of those so far. I've only tried the Sleers. Is it Slurs? Sleers?
Sleers? I'm not a native Bavarian. Sleers? I think Sleers. Yeah.
You've actually got a regular who's come along to a tasting where I tasted the Sleers, who is from Germany and completely corrected me and said how wrong I was saying it. But yeah, Schliers. I'm completely confused now after speaking to her last time tasting in person Oak Barrel. So,
and the best thing about this is while we're all practicing how to say it, it's best if we social distance and sit away because there's a lot of Schliers. There's a lot of uncoded things.
Virtually.
Yeah. Now, look, Thanks for joining us, and everyone who is watching on the Facebook and the YouTube and oakbarrel.com.au/live, wherever you were. Thank you for your comments and joining us, and particularly for those of us who are in lockdown like me. Feel free to. You've all got my email. Feel free to send it through to any other questions, any other thoughts to me on the email. And we will see you next week for this, but we'll have some things during the week as well because I have nothing to do. There's no bars to go to, so I'm going to be sitting in front of a computer. Simon, Dave, thank you very much. It's a pleasure as always, and as much we'll do it in a room sometimes, maybe.
Oh, yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. I did do my first live event a couple of weeks back in London. It was fantastic, but
did you remember to wear pants?
Yeah, I did remember where. Yeah.
Well, I've been showing off to the UK how I've been doing live tastings out in Australia, and I spoke too soon, didn't I? It's my fault we're in lockdown. Yeah, I spoke too soon, did some live tastings, and now we're back. We're back where we were a year ago.
Blame McGorum. I normally do. All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to sign off now. As I say, anything with the word boutique on it's got free shipping Australia-wide for the next 24 hours or so, or at least tonight until I remember to turn it off tomorrow. But we will see you all at some point, and thank you for joining us. And be safe, drink whiskey, be happy.
Thank you very much for having me.